If you're tired of getting rejected on sales calls and need a way to convince a client to actually pay you real money on sales calls, then I'm going to show you the top 3 objections that are killing your chances of being able to land those high-ticket clients, and more importantly, how you can overcome them, or even better yet, just never get them in the first place. And if you stay to the end, I'll give you the exact scripts on how to overcome each of these 3 objections, as well as the rest of the top objections that I've gotten throughout my career. So chances are, if you've had a content business for any amount of time, you've probably heard all 3 of these objections, or if you haven't, you're gonna definitely hear them pretty soon, so I want to make sure that you're actually prepared. Now, real quick, I just want to be able to identify the difference between a condition and an objection, because they're very similar, but there's one key difference that makes a huge difference in terms of how you actually handle these. A condition is an external circumstance outside of both your control and the client's control that are preventing them from being able to work with you. So these are things like they're waiting on funding, maybe it's just not the right time because they're undergoing a renovation, or they have a product prototype that they're waiting on, or it's just not the right season, something like that. Or it could be that they need approval from the higher ups or a manager. So these are all conditions that are totally legitimate, and they're not objections. Now, an objection is very similar to a condition with one main difference, and that is that it's an excuse that the client makes due to a disbelief in the efficacy of your product, meaning that they just don't believe that your product will actually get them to the end result. So when we're talking objection handling, all you're doing is just taking that negative belief a client has about you, your service, your process, whatever it might be, and just replacing it with the positive belief that's necessary for them to be able to move forward with you. Now, obviously, this has to be true, but assuming that it is, this is how you handle those objections. Now, the first objection I want to cover, it's probably honestly the reason you're watching this video in the first place, is the classic, we do not have the budget. Now, this can sound a few different ways. It might say it's too expensive, we don't have the budget, we're waiting on financing. There's all kinds of different ways this could sound, but it all boils down to the fact that they feel like they do not have the finances or resources to move forward. Now, I know that this sounds like a financial objection because they bring up money, so obviously it must be finances, but in reality, more often than not, it's really not a financial objection, but rather a different value-based objection that's masked as finances so that it's their nice way of saying that they don't want to work with you. So earlier I talked about the difference between a real condition versus an objection or an excuse. So a financial condition could be that they're waiting on funding, that they just had their budget approved and that they don't have any more room in the budget, or anything along the lines of that they just don't have the resources, they don't have access to a loan, they don't have access to the funds, they literally do not have the money in their account. Now, a financial objection means that they do have access to the finances, they have it in their account, they have access to a loan, whatever it might be, but they just don't think that investing with you is worth the amount that you're asking. So hopefully that makes sense. So if you get this financial objection where they say they don't have the budget, there's a few solutions to this to make sure that you don't get it ahead of time. The first one is just to make sure that you talk to clients that actually have money. So clients have to be both willing and able to afford you. If they're willing to afford you, but they don't have the budget, then that doesn't really make sense. If they're able to afford you, but they are not willing to make the investment, then again, it doesn't really make sense. So you have to make sure you're talking to the right people, and most of your issue will be solved just by changing the clientele you're talking to. So as an example, if you're working with small retail businesses, typically they don't have a big budget because they don't have high margins, they don't sell a whole lot, they don't make a whole lot, so they don't have excess margin to be able to invest into marketing. But if you work with companies that just make more money in their business, then they're going to have more margin to be able to reinvest into marketing, and spending $3,000 is not a big deal for them. So the question becomes, well, how do I find those companies that are actually willing to invest with me? For me personally, I like working with resorts, and specifically luxury resorts, because they charge high rates, they have bigger amenities, they have add-ons, all this kind of stuff where they can increase their average order value, which means they have excess margin to be able to pay somebody like me to do marketing for them or to do content for them. I also work with brands that do anywhere between 2 to 10 million annually, just because anything less than 2 million, typically they don't have the budget. Anything over 10, typically they'll have a pre-established team and it's a little bit harder to get in. So between 2 to 10 million is kind of the sweet spot, and I find that I can get the best results for them. Now, you can also look at other industries like real estate, healthcare, contractors, any kind of construction related thing, insurance, lawyers. There's all kinds of different things. Basically, anybody who sells something expensive and makes a lot of money traditionally is a niche that you could definitely go into. I personally just like brands and resorts just because I think they're more fun. So now, assuming that you're talking to somebody who has money, the next thing to check is to make sure that your offer is actually valuable. So if you're telling a client that you can do videos and the client's saying it's not worth the price, then maybe you need to actually solve bigger problems with your videos or offer more for your package. So maybe instead of just shooting a video, you offer a strategy session, you offer a consultation, you offer posting. Like, there's all kinds of different things that you can add on to make your offer more valuable. And I mean, ultimately, ultimately, if we're honest, if you can find a way to show how a brand will make an extra 50 grand a year using your content, then you should have no problem being able to charge 5 to 10,000. The key is you have to be able to show them that you can actually make them that ROI so that they'll be willing to invest. If you want to learn how to create an offer that you can charge at least 5,000 a month for, then check out this video here where I break down my entire offer workflow. Now, assuming that you're talking to people with money and that you have an offer that's actually valuable, but you're still getting that financial objection of we don't have the budget, then it's likely not really a financial thing, and it's more likely that you just haven't explained the value well enough. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that it's actually a true financial objection. And if we're speaking to people that have money and we actually have something of value, chances are it's not a real financial objection. So here's how to expose it. So you can say something along the lines of, yeah, I totally understand that you mentioned that budget is a concern. So just besides budget, is there anything else that's keeping you less than 100% certain that this is what you need in order to achieve the dream outcome? So that could be getting a better efficiency on your ads. That could be getting a higher conversion rate on the ads. It could be increasing booking, whatever the dream outcome is that you figured out throughout the rest of the call. And they might say, no, it's really just a budget thing. At this point, you need to get a double confirmation that it's truly a budget issue. So you'll essentially ask the same question again. So you'll say something like, okay, so just to make sure, budget aside, you're a 10 out of 10, you're all in, you know that this is what you need, right? And if they say anything besides that they're a 10 out of 10 and that they know that this is what they need, that means they're not sold on the idea that working with you is actually what they need. So it's not really a budget objection, it's a value objection, which we'll get to in a sec. And if the answer is yes, and they're like, yes, I'm a 10 out of 10, but I don't think we can make this work. I don't know if we can afford it. Then you can talk about things like split payments. I wouldn't recommend doing more than like 2 or 3 if you're doing a bulk project. Or you could talk about doing maybe a monthly retainer where it's a little bit lower and maybe they could make that work. Just depending on what you're actually offering, what your deliverables are, there's some ways that you can make some, payment plans and cheaper options that clients can move forward with, but that's kind of your option there. Now, moving on to objection number 2, which is that they just need to talk to somebody, they need to talk to the team, something like that. So this is one of those situations that this, again, could be a legitimate condition where you're talking to somebody that's not the real decision maker. Maybe they're, a marketing intern, maybe they're even the marketing manager, but they need to get the approval of a bigger team, or they need to get the approval of the owner, something like that. So in that case, that's a real condition. So you're not going to be able to make the sale on that call. But again, you got to make sure this is a real objection first, because if it's not, then this could just be an excuse to get you off the phone and they're going to ghost you right away. So here's how you handle it. So you can say, yeah, totally understand. Definitely don't want you to make a hasty decision. Totally get that you need to talk to the team. I'd encourage you to talk to the team, really. But just to make sure, assuming you get a unanimous yes from the team, or, most of them are on board, is there anything else that's keeping you less than 100% certain that this is what you need in order to achieve the dream outcome? Again, if that's getting better efficiency on ads, more bookings, whatever it is. At that point, they'll probably say, no, I just really need to talk it over with the team. So you say, so you need to get that double confirmation now. So you say, okay, I totally get it. So just so I understand, team aside, you're a 10 out of 10, you're totally sold. This is what you need. And you're just trying to make sure everyone else is a 10 out of 10 as well, right? So again, if they do not say that they're a 10 out of 10 and they're completely sold on this idea, then that means that, again, it's a value issue and you got to handle that objection, which I'll show you how to do here in a minute. But if they say that they are a 10 out of 10 and they just need to talk to the team, then this is how you handle it. So you could say something like, that's awesome to hear. Glad to hear that you are on board with this. So just to make sure, I know you got to talk to the rest of the team, but are they aware that this is kind of a problem that you're looking to solve? And they'll probably be like, yeah, they know. Okay, great. So when you go talk to the team, provided you show them what I've shown you, you said that you're sold on it. I'm, assuming that you present it kind of like how I did. Do you think the team would be pretty on board with this? And at that point, if they're sold, they're going to become your salesperson to their team. That's why you got to make sure that they're sold on it before they go talk to the team. But assuming that they're sold on it, they'll probably be like, yeah, they'll definitely be on board because, it all makes sense. So at that point, you're like, okay, great, awesome. Glad that you're going to talk to them, hear that they'll probably be on board. So just curious, when do you think you'll be able to talk to them? Now, if they say anything besides like today, tomorrow, maybe 3 days from now, and if they say something like, I'll talk to them in 2 weeks, then I'd start to question a little bit, like, why are we taking so much time to talk to these people? Unless it's truly like they have like a board meeting or something that they have to, wait for that, or somebody's on vacation and they have to wait for them to come back. But if they're stalling kind of for no reason, then you can kind of call that out and just ask them, so it sounded like you were sold, but you're saying that you can't talk to them for another 2 weeks. So just kind of curious, is this not really a priority for you guys? And then maybe it again is more of a value issue at that point. But assuming that they can talk to them in the next 2 days, then you can say something like, okay, great. So let's do this. I'll set up a call for us on Friday. You guys can talk to the team, work out whatever you need to work out, have those conversations, and then we'll reconvene on Friday. You can invite anyone to the call that you want, but if they're busy, totally get it. It can just be me and you if you need. Does that work? And then at that point, they'll say, yeah, that works. Cool. Does the same time work? Yep. Same time works. Great. Awesome. Just before I go, do you think there's any questions that the team will have that maybe I can answer ahead of time? And at that point, they'll either tell you the questions they have or they won't. And then you send them a Google Calendar link, make sure they confirm that they'll be there again at the right time, make sure they have all the information and got the email so that they don't have any excuse of not to show up. And then you can let them go and then, reconvene on Friday or whatever day it is that you set. Now that brings us to the third objection, which is what most objections are really, and that is an uncertainty objection. So about 90% of objections are uncertainty objections, and it can sound a whole lot of different ways, like I need to think about it, I need to sleep on it, I need a guarantee, I need to talk to more of your clients, I don't have the time, we're too busy, like basically anything that's a stall tactic so that they don't have to give you a real answer. So if you're hearing like I need to think about it, I need to sleep on it, that kind of stuff, that is really just the client's nice way of telling you that they don't want what you have and that they're never going to talk to you again and they're probably going to ghost you. So if I hear that, I assume that the answer is actually a no, which is typically because they don't understand the value that I'm actually providing, which means I didn't do a good enough job actually explaining that value to the client. So the core of this objection, if you get any of these that I just mentioned, is that the client doesn't actually believe that either you, your service, or both are what they need in order to go from where they're at now to where they want to go. So if that's the case, here's how you handle that. You do what's called a temperature check. And this is basically a gauge of where they're at on a 1 to 10 scale. So you could ask something like, I totally get it, totally understand that you need to think about it. I definitely don't want to force you into a decision that you're not ready to make yet. So just so I know for my own self, where are you kind of at on a scale of 1 to 10? 1 being like, I hate this dude, I want to hang up, I can't stand him. And 10 being like, I'm ready to invest right now. I need to get my team on, like we're ready to pay the invoice. Where do you kind of sit on that 1 to 10 ratio? In my experience, most clients will answer a 6 or 7 if they're not really sold. If they are sold and they say something like a 9 or a 10, then at that point you can say, okay, so that sounds like you're great, like you're a 9. So what would get you to a 10? And usually it's just like little small stuff. You just have to answer a question that'll get them to a 10. Now, if they're anything less than a 9, like let's say for an example, a 7, then this is how you handle that. So the client says they're a 7. You say, okay, great. So first of all, I appreciate your honesty. I really, really do. So you mentioned you're at a 7. What would it take for you to get to a 10? And then they'll answer whatever it is. That's going to be their real objection. That's the real reason that they don't want to work with you. So let's just say, for example, they need to see more client case studies. So at that point, you can say, okay, great. Totally understand. If I were you, I'd want to see some client case studies as well. So yeah, how many do you need to see? And then they'll answer, let's just say it's 3. You say, okay, great. So if I send you 3 client case studies, or if I show you 3 client case studies right now, would that bring you from a 7 to a 10? And at that point, they will either say yes, which at that point, that's the real objection, or they'll say no, and then they'll bring up something else. But assuming they say yes, then you just pull up the case studies from your website on the screen, share it with them. You can pull up clients' Instagrams, any kind of real work that you have, whatever it might be, and then show them those case studies on the call, because sometimes that's all clients need, is just a little proof that you've done this before. Now, let's take another example where the client says they're at a 7. So you say the same thing. You're like, okay, totally understand. I appreciate the honesty. So you mentioned you're at a 7. What would it take to get you to a 10? And they might say something along the lines of, I just really need to think about it. And at that point, you can say, okay, that's great. Totally understand. What do you feel that you need to think about? And at this point, they might either give you a real answer, which is the real objection, or they might just kind of stall and kind of give you something vague again, which at that point, you can identify that there's not really an objection, but it's more so nerves, or they're just, a little uneasy, or it's like a big risk and they're just uneasy with parting with the amount of money that you're asking them to. So the way you can kind of handle this is you can really start coaching them through the nerves and the big decision. So you can say something like, can I be honest? Like, it's a big decision. It's a chunk of change, and be real empathetic with them, okay? And they'll probably be like, yeah, it really is. It's a big decision for me. It's a lot of money for me. You can say, okay, yeah, I totally get it. And like, to be honest, like, that's a good thing that you're feeling those nerves, because if you didn't, I think you're a robot. Like, the fact that you feel those feelings means that you're human. And the fact that you have those nerves proves to me that this decision has weight to it. It means this is an important decision to you. It means that there's actually impact that'll be made on your business, whether you choose to work with me or not. And I don't take that lightly. Now, that's okay that you have those nerves, but deep down in your gut, you told me already that you feel like this is what you need in order to be able to make that decision, in order to be able to make that change in your business. You told me that. So you know that deep down in your gut. So you have to decide for yourself, despite the nerves, despite the fear, despite all these different things that are in the way, you have to make that decision for yourself. I can't sit here and make it for you. But what I can tell you is that, let's say, for example, Steve Jobs, right before he was about to launch the iPhone, felt the nerves, crumbled back, felt the fear, and then he didn't present the iPhone. The world would be a much different place than it is right now. But the fact that he felt those nerves, because he did, he's not superhuman, he did feel those nerves, and he got on that stage and he presented something that changed the world anyways, proves that you can do anything once you face those fears. Now, if you truly believe that this is what you need to change your business, then I guess I'm asking you, are you going to be the type of person that feels that fear, feels the nerves, and crumbles back? Or are you going to be the type of person that feels the fear, feels the nerves, and decides to break through it and pursue it anyways? Because that's ultimately where growth comes from. And when you do that, you start to coach people through how to actually handle those nerves and that fear and the big decision-making process, so that it gives them clarity and it gives them more intentionality in being able to actually think through these processes and rationalize that, okay, this is just me being nervous, this is normal, but I know that I have to make this decision in order to make a change. Ultimately, those are the three main objections. There's a bunch of other objections as well. So like I said, if you want to have the exact scripts to be able to implement these into your own business, I actually left a link in the description below that you can check out that has all three of these objections, as well as the rest of the top objections that I've gotten throughout the course of my 5-year career. So hopefully you can use those to be beneficial in your business. Now, if you are a creator doing between $3,000 to $5,000 a month and you just watch this video and you're like, dude, I'm just struggling with sales, I'm struggling to get people on calls, struggling to actually have these conversations with people and really convince them to be able to work with me, then I want to invite you to click the link in the description below. I actually have a link to speak with a member of my team. He's going to walk you through our precision prospecting process, which shows you exactly how we handle our sales process in my business as well as with my creator clients. We'll show you things like our exact framework of how to run discovery calls, our exact proposal templates of how to implement different psychological tactics to actually get clients on board working with you, and also how to objection handle even more so than what I've shown you in this video, and most importantly, doing role plays so that I'll jump on a call specifically with you and walk you through how I would handle a call where you'll be you, I'll be the client, or vice versa, and you can see in real time how to actually handle these sales calls so you get the reps and you get the practice before you have to hop on the real call, so you have a much higher chance of actually landing the client. So if you're interested in learning how that could work for your specific business, then click the link in the description below. Book a call with a member of my team. He'll walk you through it. I cannot wait to see you in the next video.